And joining us now is another of the lead researchers for the NBQA, Dr. Jeff Savell, Professor of Meat Science at Texas A&M University. Dr. Savell, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you.
You know, earlier in the show, we talked a little bit about the in-person interviews, and I know you were involved with the plant research. Tell us a little bit about the in-plant research and why that's so important to NBQA.
Well, one of the things we've done historically with the National Beef Quality Audit is actually going into plants around the country, and we did the same thing this time. All the collaborators were virtually visited every plant, every large-scale plant across the country to collect information, harvest floor, coolers, transportation, all kinds of things.
Sure.
And so it's a great source of information for us to use.
So you mentioned harvest floor, but my understanding is that that included everything from transportation to a new component, mobility and harvest floor. Tell our viewers a little bit about what goes in that assessment.
Well, one of the things our research team did was look at transportation. You know, where did the cattle come from, how far they were transported, how much room did they have on the trucks and trailers to be able to transport them and such. One of the things we found is we were around about 12 square feet for the average per animal there, which is probably a little low for the larger cattle we have today. So it may be something the industry wants to work on and make sure that we're not putting too many cattle on a trailer that could impact their comfort or bruising and things like that. We added mobility this time, which was new, to get really a baseline assessment of how mobile the cattle were as they arrived at the plant. And we were very impressed that the numbers were extremely high, that had virtually no mobility problems. And that's something that at least from now, we've got a good baseline information that can be used in the future to look at that kind of assessment.
And so tell us a little bit more about the actual cooler assessment you did, and what did you learn there?
So on the cooler assessment, we looked at 9,000 carcasses, and we had assistance from USDA meat grading supervisors to help collect that information, so we have official USDA grades that we can use. And one of the things, I think, one of the good news for the beef industry is the percent prime and choice was up, and so it was about 72% of the carcasses that qualified in that. Probably know everybody should probably know by now that carcass weights are up, and so we were about average of 860 pounds, and so that's a trend that we've seen over all these years.
Sure.
But everything else looked very good for the carcasses on that.
You mentioned choice and quality grading carcasses, and I know one thing that a lot of producers have asked is the overall efficacy and accuracy of instrument grading. What did you learn about that?
Well, we had another phase of this where we looked at the information from instrument grading, which is used by a lot of the major packers today. And they shared information with us, and we actually had 4.5 million carcass observations with complete information that we could take, homogenized, so we took the information away of where they came from and such and just used that for averages. And that was a huge percentage of the number of cattle that were processed in 2016. And the amazing thing is how comparable that information is compared to the in-plant information that the USDA grader assisted us in doing. In fact, is extremely close. The marbling score is virtually dead on. And so it gives us great comfort that we know that, you know, the in-plant with the grader and what they're predicting and what the machine, the instruments are predicting are virtually the same thing. And I think cattle producers should be happy that those systems are in check with each other.
Absolutely, that's great news. And one other question for you, what value do you see as we compare what we've learned this year from previous studies?
You know, the National Beef Quality Audit, we do it about every 5 years. And the nice thing about that, over this 25-year time period since it started, you have a roadmap of where you've been and where you're headed. And you have a chance to really look at places where the improvements have been made, and also opportunities where adjustments or other kinds of things may need to be done by producers to be able to improve the quality of the beef that they produce.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your continued leadership in this effort.